Real quick before we get into today's video, just want to thank the people over on Patreon who have taken the time out to help support the channel, and just got to say thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for your support. Once I start offering memberships and figure out what to offer for memberships on this channel, I'll start adding the names of YouTube members as well. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into the review. Yo, what up everybody, it's your boy Naruto Explained here, bringing you guys a review for Boruto episode 186. And now that Boruto episode 186 is done and in the book, oh man, we got a lot to talk about. So there were obviously some changes made to the Boruto versus Ao fight. Some of these changes were actually for the better. I enjoyed some of them, and there's one change that I was so disappointed that they made to the anime version of the fight. Like, on a scale from 1 to 10, my level of disappointment is an absolute 10 out of 10. So going right into what I was disappointed with, because I have to get this out the way right now. So I've been so excited to actually see Mitsuki use purple lightning in the anime, and I was so disappointed that they changed it. So in the manga version of the fight, you know, it's a lot quicker. It's a lot quicker. Like, you see Mitsuki jump out and Ao throws an attack. Mitsuki ducks underneath it, jumps up into the air, and then Mitsuki says lightning style. And then on the next page, you get this very beautiful slanted panel where you see Mitsuki using purple lightning. He's shooting it off as a projectile at Ao, and then Ao uses that ninja tech tool to absorb the jutsu, and Mitsuki gets right up in this dude's grill before getting knocked away. Then Sarada jumps up in the air, and unlike what you saw in the anime, Sarada gets a clean hit on Ao after Ao blocks the first attack. And so I gotta say, I was a little disappointed we didn't see Mitsuki's purple lightning. However, what I will say is that the changes that they made to the actual battle, I enjoy it. So one thing I've always said is that the snapshot type of way that Ikimoto does the manga is something that I'm very, very disappointed in because of the lack of detail in a lot of those instances. And what this episode did is that this episode did just that. The fights actually had room to breathe, where you were able to kind of stay in the moment and stay in the action for a little bit longer. And so I feel like that added more to the actual scenes, where you see Mitsuki, and Mitsuki is swapping hands with Ao, and he's changing trajectory in his attacks and everything. I thought that that was very nice to actually see a more drawn out version of that fight. And what I think that it actually accomplishes is it gives you the opportunity to see that Ao, even though Ao is fighting as a tool and not so much as a shinobi, Ao through that fight is slowly regressing back towards being an actual shinobi. And one thing that you actually see is the fact that Ao, despite all this teamwork from Team 7 and despite all the short taijutsu barrages that he's going through, he's never actually not in control of the fight. Whereas in the manga version, it really felt like Team 7, even though Ao openly called them out talking about he wanted the smoke, Ao was getting slapped around in the beginning of that fight. He was able to hold off Mitsuki for a second, but Mitsuki and Sarada both got in some very good shots on him. And even when you get to the Boruto portion of the fight in the manga, Boruto in the manga wasn't going through and taking out all those drones. Like, literally the drones are shooting off those jutsu attacks, and then Boruto, in the time between the smoke being able to clear and the drones being able to start their next attack, Boruto's going straight towards Ao, going straight for a attack barrage on him. So I like how the anime fleshed things out and stayed in the moment more. I thought that that was very nice. Now, I also thought it was pretty cool how when you saw Konohamaru, and Konohamaru was shooting off all those fire style attacks, again, they lived in the moment more. I thought that that was pretty cool. And I gotta say, like, when Sarada comes through and Sarada gets knocked around, I thought it was pretty cool to see how Sarada actually bounces back. Again, that's a little bit different than what you saw in the actual manga, because in the anime version, you see how Sarada, even though she doesn't have her Sharingan on, she's able to adjust to Ao's attacks. Like, you see how Ao is knocking her from the air as Sarada lands in that attack, and then Sarada's on that freaking tree branch and she jumps up, she smashes the branch that Ao's on. Ao is adjusting to her attacks. He takes her, he tries to flip her, but Sarada is able to halt her momentum in mid-stride and land in a couple attacks and then flip the advantage on the Ao. Then she lands on the ground, and then before the guy's able to fully adjust, she's using her fire style jutsu. Like, those little moments right there, I know that Sarada got training from Sasuke before this arc, but those of you guys who only watch the anime, you don't actually know that. And so I'm not referring to what you saw in the car actuation arc. I'm talking about very specific training that Sasuke does with Sarada in the Sasuke Shinden novel that's meant to emulate what you get in battle experience. And in particular, Sasuke, there's very specific training that he does with Sarada with her 3 Tomoe Sharingan, and there's training that's being done during the course of that novel that directly explains why Sarada is able to keep up with Ao without actually having to turn on her Sharingan. So again, I know that stuff because I know that Sasuke's training with Sarada over the course of those weeks in the novel is stuff that directly benefits her in this fight. But I really feel like the anime probably should have adapted more of that stuff in the car actuation arc, since they knew they weren't going to be adapting the Sasuke Shinden novel. Another thing I thought was pretty cool, how after they start pressuring this dude and they just start firing off all these barrages of jutsu, Ao's breaking down everything. And that's what I mean when I say you start seeing the progression of this guy slowly going back to his shinobi ways, because he's starting to think like a shinobi now. He's starting to realize that there's deception behind deception. But at the same time, the true brilliance of this fight is the fact that Ao has basically allowed himself to be a tool, a weapon for so long that the guy forgot the most fundamental basics of what it means to be a shinobi. His shinobi instincts have dulled that much to where he actually gets caught off guard by Boruto. And there's a little bit of a difference of what you see in the manga and the anime. In the manga, if I'm not mistaken, Boruto actually uses the chakra sword and he actually cuts off part of Ao's limbs. That was a pretty savage moment in the manga. In the anime, he just hits him with the Rasengan. However, what I will say though is you see true symbolism in Boruto and Ao. Ao says that, hey, I'm just a tool, I'm a weapon for Kar. But if you go back to the Land of Waves arc, that's one of the things that Naruto was struggling with, which was the fact that shinobi were essentially tools to be used in service of whoever actually hired them. And so you're seeing how Ao, even though he's calling himself a tool, how his heart is slowly moving back towards being an actual shinobi. By referring to himself as a tool, he's never actually thrown away what it means to be an actual shinobi in that retrospect, because Ao is from the same cloth and vein as Zabuza. They came up during a different time in a different era. So I thought that was very good symbolism right there. I like how they incorporated that scientific ninja weapon tech, a lightsaber basically, and they're forcing him to hold on to it and drain his actual chakra levels. Some people might look at that and say, why is that so important? Well, Ao up to this point was still clearly ahead of them. So he was clearly ahead of the Team 7, even though they're prodigies. He was still clearly ahead of Konohamaru, even though Konohamaru is one of the more powerful Jonin in Konoha. I know Konohamaru's a bit of a joke, but at the same time, you have to look at it from this perspective. Look at how much trouble those ninja weapon tech puppets gave Team 7 and realize that Konohamaru took out all of them by himself with an injured Mujino. That's a detail that kind of gets overlooked at that point. And so what I will say is that I like how you have that moment right there where all that is taking place, and you see how after he gets drained, that's when the battle truly begins to kind of shift in the favor of the new Team 7. So I like how they use that opportunity to actually bring him down. That's actually a way of depowering a character to where people can actually stomach it. It's basically the same thing as Urashiki using that fishing hook to steal chakra, but in this case, because it's actual scientific ninja weapon tech and it's something that nobody actually expected to see, I feel like that's something that's gonna go over a lot better with fans right there. So I like seeing that moment right there, and I like seeing how Ao's breathing very heavy. You're starting to see that Ao is beginning to run lower on chakra because of a result of this. And I gotta say, when it gets to Boruto and Boruto's actually fighting against those drones, dude, that's one of those moments right there to where I was low-key thinking about the Spider-Man Far From Home scene where all those drones that Mysterio has are kind of getting shot all over the place, and Spider-Man's just jumping all over the place with very beautiful cinematic photography right there. Very, very beautiful. And I thought that for a moment they were going that direction. It was still very well done. But I was like, man, we have to get like 5, maybe 6 minutes of this. And then I realized, okay, they're trying to adapt all the way to the just about the end of chapter 22. So I realized they weren't going to stay in the moment too long on that, but they gave us just enough to make you realize that, hey, Boruto's actually shown some growth too. So I thought that was really cool. We literally see Boruto overcome the scientific ninja weapon tech drones. We literally see him overcome those as he's using all 3 of his chakra natures. We're seeing Boruto throw everything out there. He's using the wind style jutsu to be able to launch himself into the air, and then he's using lightning style and infusing it with his shuriken jutsu that Sasuke taught him. That's actually an Uchiha style lightning style jutsu, and so I thought that was cool to see that element in there. And then as Boruto starts taking out more of those drones, Boruto suddenly busts out water release. And what I find very interesting is that if you look at the pattern, if you take what the anime said at face value, that Boruto's strongest chakra nature is wind release. That was what was said in the car actuation arc by Boruto himself. If you take that at face value, Boruto literally was using his chakra natures from strongest to least, and you're seeing the diminishing returns on the impact of all of them. I know somebody's like, yo, Boruto whipped out this huge water style attack. What the hell are you talking about? Yes, Boruto whipped out a water style attack. It was drawn in a very, very streamlined and impressive way. However, Al says the thing that I told you guys in Boruto use water release, which is the fact that Boruto is spitting out a high volume of water release attack, but there's no punch behind it. There's not a lot of punch behind the actual attack, which is what Al brings up. Al basically says like, yo, got a lot of volume there, but that level of water release is not going to do anything against those drones, much less against me. And Boruto even says like, because you were once a shinobi of the hidden mist village, it makes sense you'd be so critical of my water release. Why is that so important? So depending on the land that you're in, so for instance like the land of water, if you're a shinobi that's born there, you have a strong affinity for water release, which is part of the reason why the land of water, it's named after the land of water. In the land of fire, a lot of shinobi in the land of fire tend to have a strong affinity for fire release. Obviously, not every shinobi that is born in these lands has the affinity for water release or fire release or whatever their ninja nation is named after, but that's just a common chakra nature in that area. So going back to Boruto saying you really are a Miss Ninja and that's why you're so critical of my water release, that's part of the reason for it. And when you hear me say that, so what, the guy has a bunch of volume if he doesn't have the strength to actually back it up, that kind of goes back to the actual written law of the Naruto world, which is the fact that as you start acquiring more changes in chakra nature, you can learn them all day, but you don't have true mastery of those chakra natures until you go through years worth of training. Every chakra nature you add by default is going to be inferior to the one that was already your primary affinity. That's why you have people that can learn the different chakra natures, but they're not true masters of them. A perfect example of this is how in the Akatsuki Hiden novel, you have a moment where Kisame is actually trapped inside of a water prison jutsu, and what Kisame does is he basically overpowers that water release jutsu by using his own water release jutsu inside of the water prison jutsu, and it's because Kisame has a even greater mastery of water release than the person that was attacking him. That's his primary chakra nature, and Kisame's attacks have more punch behind them. So it's the same thing here with Boruto. Boruto uses a water release attack, but as we saw with Naruto and as we see now with Al, the water release attack does not have the same punch behind it as his other attacks do. It's still very impressive for a 12-year-old Genin, don't get me wrong. 3 changes in chakra nature is extremely impressive. Sasuke only had 2 at that age. That's very impressive, especially when you consider that you have Jonin that struggled to learn 2 changes in chakra nature. So this is highly impressive stuff. I'm not downplaying it, I'm just saying Boruto has room to grow. And I gotta say, man, like once you actually see Boruto take down Ao and Boruto is using his Rasengan and he lands the attack, very, very impressive how in that moment after all this takes place, Boruto has that moment where he looks at Ao and he's got that screwdriver and he's like, yeah, you remember this right here? Yo, that was so hot right there, man. I love that moment when it happened in the manga, and I like that moment in the anime, and I also like how Ao looks at him and says, like, you know, like father, like son, that soft mentality is gonna get you killed one day. And I'll just say, you know, if Boruto was being written like how Hiro Mashima wrote Rave Master, so his first series, you'd be in a scenario to where your favorite main character would die. But you know, the way that they do Boruto, I mean, they're too soft to actually kill Boruto. I'll be very surprised if something like that happens to where they pull a Hiro Mashima in that instance. And so I don't think Boruto has anything to worry about there, but it's still nice to see that that's being thrown out there because you're seeing how the old generation is looking at the new generation. It's so poetic, in my opinion, that Ao, somebody who was constantly talking shit about the new generation in the second part of the Naruto anime, is actually being taken down by a child that was born to a parent from the same generation that Ao crapped on the entire time that we got introduced to him. So very nice. They're kind of rewarding you on the back end if you're a longtime Naruto fan. And I just want to add this in post-recording. I'm okay with the whole reason they gave us why Ao became a member of the car organization as an outer member. I'm actually going to make a separate video on that this week because I don't want this review to go over 20 minutes. Right now, I've recorded 30 minutes of audio for this review, and I don't think you guys actually want to sit through a 30-minute review over an 18-minute anime episode. That's just my thoughts on it, though. So I'm gonna make a separate video on the whole downfall of Ao later this week. So just kind of keep your eyes peeled for that. That'll be a double upload at some point. So my episode question to you guys is, how do you guys feel about Ao's reason for turning into Car, and who were you most impressed with in this battle when it comes to members of Team 7? Whose growth impressed you more? Was it Sarda fighting without the Sharingan? Was it Mitsuki? Was it Konohamaru? Or was it actually Boruto being able to take down all those drones by himself and take down Ao? Let me know down in the comment section below. But as always, guys, if you like anything I had to say, don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much for watching until the end. Have an awesome day, guys.